Elaine Carter stood beneath the glittering chandeliers of the luxury boutique, her heels clicking softly against the marble tiles as she made her way through rows of designer handbags and jewelry displays. The store was bathed in golden light, with air perfumed in some elegant blend of jasmine and exclusivity. But despite its warmth and shine, the atmosphere chilled the moment Elaine walked in. Her presence, dignified and calm, seemed to ripple through the space like a drop in still water. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, conversations dipped to a whisper. She wasn't dressed extravagantly, no dripping diamonds or blinding logos, just a neat navy blazer, dark slacks, and leather flats that had seen more city blocks than red carpets. Her grey-streaked hair was pulled into a low bun, and her face, though soft with age, bore the kind of strength that didn't ask for respect. It commanded it. Elaine had come with a simple purpose: to look, to consider, maybe even to buy. But before she had taken her third step into the store, she felt it, that silent, suffocating doubt pressing in from all sides. She'd felt it before, not in her younger days, but even now, as a retired dean, a mother, a grandmother. Some rooms still refused to let her belong. Then came the voice, sharp, barking, "Leave! You don't belong here, and you're making my customers uncomfortable." The words cracked through the air like a whip. Elaine turned slowly toward the sound. A tall, wiry man in a fitted suit stood at the edge of the counter. His name tag read, Richard, store manager. His expression curled with contempt, his eyes not bothering to hide their prejudice. Elaine's heartbeat quickened, but her spine straightened. Her fingers closed more tightly around her leather purse. "I have every right to be here," she replied, voice firm yet calm, "and I'm not going anywhere." The tension in the boutique thickened like humidity before a storm. Shoppers froze, some stared. A few, more modern in instinct, pulled out their phones, their screens already glowing, eager to document what felt like the beginning of a confrontation. Richard walked closer, his shoes striking the floor like accusations. "This store is for serious shoppers, not window browsers who can't afford anything." Elaine's eyes remained locked with his. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't retreat. "Is that what you think I am?" she asked quietly. There was no tremble in her tone, only quiet dignity. He scoffed, smirking. "Just get out or I'll call the cops." For a moment all Elaine could hear was her own breathing and the soft clicking of a camera phone nearby. She knew how this game was played. She had seen it, lived it, not just in headlines but in lived experience. Accusations, assumptions, and the expectation that she would shrink, apologize, disappear. But she stood tall. Then something flickered in her peripheral vision. A woman in a red coat, tall, blonde, and draped in designer from head to toe, had just slipped a diamond necklace into her handbag. It was swift, practiced. No one else seemed to notice. But Elaine had. She tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure you want to call the police?" she said, eyes drifting subtly toward the thief. Richard didn't notice the cue. He was too consumed with his own righteousness. "Yes, and I will. If you don't walk out now, I'll make sure you're banned from this property." Elaine slowly turned to face the rest of the store. Phones were still up, eyes wide, everyone watching, none intervening. But now, they had also seen what Elaine had. A few customers glanced toward the woman in red, their expressions shifting. Richard moved to his desk, fumbling for the store's phone, but before he could dial, a voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me," a young sales associate said hesitantly. She looked nervous, barely older than 25, her voice soft but laced with urgency. I think she saw something." Richard stopped. "What are you talking about?" The girl stepped forward, glancing at Elaine, then back to the woman in red. "The necklace display is empty, and I think it was there just a few minutes ago." Elaine said nothing. She didn't have to. The truth was already unraveling. Suddenly, the entire energy shifted. The judgment that had been aimed at Elaine swiveled like a spotlight onto someone else. Amanda, the woman in red, froze, then turned toward the door. "Ma'am," Richard called, suddenly unsure, "could you please hold on a moment?" Amanda smiled thinly. Is there a problem? The girl from earlier whispered something into Richard's ear. His face paled. Elaine took a step back and folded her arms. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk, but she watched, with the same composure that had carried her through decades of boardrooms and classrooms and battles far more intense than this. Amanda was stopped by security at the door. They asked politely to check her bag. When she hesitated, they offered to call the authorities. Within seconds, the necklace was found, still wrapped in its delicate tissue, tucked under her wallet. Gasps followed. Phones were raised again, but this time not to record Elaine, but the actual thief. Elaine turned to leave. She had seen enough. But Richard followed, his voice lower now. Less bark, more begging. Wait, I apologize for what I said earlier, he murmured. That was uncalled for. I made an assumption I shouldn't have. Elaine stopped at the doorway. She didn't turn to face him. You didn't just make an assumption, she said. You tried to humiliate me. You tried to make me small because you thought I was. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Richard's voice rang through the boutique like the clanging of a warning bell, but no one seemed sure anymore who the warning was for. His anger had not cooled. If anything, it had deepened with desperation. He still believed he held authority in this store, still thought his perception ruled the moment, blind to the unraveling truth around him. Elaine Carter stood silent now, not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood that silence, when held with strength, spoke louder than outrage. She watched Amanda, still dressed in crimson arrogance, her lips curled in fake interest as her fingers danced near yet another jewelry display, as if no one could see what she was doing, as if theft, wrapped in privilege and pearls, wasn't still theft. Amanda slid another bracelet into her handbag, and Richard, he didn't see a thing. Or maybe he refused to. Instead, his rage still burned in Elaine's direction. I've called the police, he snapped. You brought this on yourself, I warned you. Elaine didn't flinch. Outside, the sharp whine of sirens sliced through the air. 2 police officers entered the store moments later. Their uniforms were crisp, their boots tracking the weight of assumptions. They looked first at Richard, who pointed swiftly at Elaine, and then turned their gaze to her, as if that alone sealed her guilt. Ma'am, one of them said sternly, you need to leave, now. Elaine looked at him calmly, her lips pressed together, her expression unreadable. The room was still, thick with tension and held breath. Then, the quiet was broken by the soft swoosh of the boutique's doors swinging open again. A sleek black car had pulled up outside. It idled without a sound, the tinted windows shielding whoever was within. And then, heels clicked sharply against the floor. 2 sharply dressed men in charcoal suits walked in, scanning the boutique quickly. Behind them walked a tall woman in a tailored navy suit, her stride purposeful, her presence commanding. The store fell silent again. One of the suited men approached Elaine. His voice was low but clear, respectful. Miss Carter, sorry we're late. Are you ready for the walk-through? Whispers rippled through the air like a wave. Richard's face lost all its color. His eyes darted from the men to Elaine and back again, confusion breaking through his earlier confidence. His lips parted, and the arrogance that had hung on every word before now dissolved into disbelief. Miss Carter, he said, barely above a whisper. Elaine turned to him slowly, her voice like ice wrapped in steel. Yes, Elaine Carter, the new owner of this store. Gasps echoed across the boutique. One customer dropped her phone. Another took a step back. Even the officers who had come to escort her out now stood frozen, their authority deflated, their misjudgment naked in the light. Elaine didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Richard took a step back, suddenly unable to meet her gaze. I didn't know, he stammered. No one told me. That much is clear, Elaine said. Her tone was even, but each word landed with precision. You saw what you wanted to see, you heard what you expected to hear, and you treated me like less than nothing because of it. He opened his mouth to apologize, but no words came. Elaine turned her attention to the rest of the store. Amanda, sensing that the story had shifted and she was no longer a background character but center stage, tried to move toward the door quietly. Her eyes were down. Her pace was subtle. Elaine saw it instantly. Before we continue, she said coolly, pointing, check her bag. The security team didn't hesitate. Two staff members stepped forward and intercepted Amanda just as she reached the threshold. Her protest came fast and flustered. "What are you doing? I haven't done anything. You can't just touch my things." But her voice cracked. It was the sound of guilt slipping through polish. One guard opened the handbag under Amanda's glare. There, glinting against a silk scarf, was a necklace and a bracelet, both high-ticket pieces, both clearly stolen. The silence was deafening. One of the officers cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you're under suspicion of theft. We'll need to detain you for questioning." Amanda's eyes filled with panic. "No, you don't understand. I shop here all the time. I know Richard. He'll tell you." But Richard said nothing. His eyes were still fixed on Elaine. The realization of everything, the mistake, the blindness, the casual cruelty, was sinking in slowly, like quicksand. The officers took Amanda aside, reading her rights as they led her out. The gasps returned. The phones resumed recording. But this time, the story unfolding was not what anyone had expected. Elaine walked forward slowly. The suited woman who had entered with her handed her a slim leather folder. Elaine opened it. Inside were the official transfer documents. The boutique, previously owned by a large corporation, had been sold quietly last week. Elaine had finalized the purchase herself, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because she believed in changing things from the inside out. She turned to the young sales associate from earlier, the only person who had spoken up. Her eyes met the girl's, and she smiled, warm and appreciative. "What's your name?" Elaine asked softly. "Jasmine," the girl replied, still a little shaken. Elaine nodded. "You have courage, Jasmine. This place could use more of that." The girl smiled, and it was genuine. Elaine then turned back to Richard. She studied him not with contempt, but with something deeper, disappointment. "You will not be staying," she said calmly. "You don't get to manage a store you believe should only serve people who look a certain way. You don't get to be the face of something you tried to keep me out of." Richard blinked, the weight of it landing heavily. She looked around the store again. This place will change. Not just the furniture, not just the branding, the culture, the way people are treated. No more whispers, no more judgments based on skin, shoes, or silence. Outside, Amanda was placed in the back of a patrol car. The press, already alerted by viral posts, began to gather. Lights flashed. The boutique had become more than a retail space. It was now a symbol of something bigger. Inside, Elaine turned to her team. "Let's begin the walkthrough," she said. They nodded and followed. Richard remained where he stood, stunned and irrelevant. Elaine Carter didn't look back. The new chapter had begun, not just for the boutique, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong, who had ever been judged at a glance, dismissed without cause, and underestimated by those who saw only surface. Because in that moment, dignity didn't just walk in. It took ownership, and it made sure the world saw what happens when truth stands tall, unshaken, and undeniable. The air inside the boutique was thick with silence, but it was no longer the silence of tension or suspicion. It was a silence heavy with realization, pierced by the echo of truth that had finally found its voice. Elaine Carter stood at the heart of it all, not as a victim, not even as a newly crowned owner, but as a force, steady, composed, undeniable. Amanda was now in the hands of justice. Richard stood with his eyes lowered, the smirk that once curled his lips erased by the weight of his own exposure. The crowd, still unsure if they were part of a scene or a moment in history, turned toward Elaine. Cameras were up, streaming her face to the world, but she wasn't speaking for the audience. She was speaking from her soul. "This store," she began, her voice smooth but resolute, "will no longer tolerate discrimination. It will no longer be a place where people are measured by their clothes or dismissed for the color of their skin. From now on, we lead with fairness and respect." No one clapped. Not yet. They were still absorbing it. The change was too real to be celebrated casually. Some nodded. A few wept. Others simply stood frozen, the reality reshaping what they thought they knew. Elaine turned then, and her gaze softened as it fell on a familiar face. Tanya, the young sales associate who had dared to speak when no one else would. She hadn't done it for recognition. She had done it because her conscience had called her to, because she couldn't stand by and allow a lie to be dressed as truth. Elaine walked toward her and stopped just inches away. "You showed integrity today," she said, the words both gentle and powerful. "And integrity deserves more than just thanks. You're the new manager." For a moment, Tanya didn't speak. Her lips trembled and her eyes shimmered as tears welled up. She covered her mouth, too stunned to respond. Her hands shook as she finally whispered, "Thank you, Miss Carter." It wasn't just gratitude in her voice. It was the sound of a door opening, one that had always been shut in her mind, now unlocked by courage and acknowledged by someone who truly saw her worth. Elaine touched her arm lightly, and the gesture said everything. Respect, belief. A passing of responsibility, not just for managing a store, but for guarding the new values that would define it. Then, Elaine turned again, this time toward the two officers who had walked in earlier and without a question sided with Richard. Their posture was stiffer now, their eyes less certain. She walked toward them slowly. "I know what you saw when you entered," she said. "You saw a black woman standing firm in a place you didn't think she belonged, and without asking questions, without listening, you tried to remove me." One of the officers tried to speak, but Elaine held up her hand, not out of disrespect, but to remind them that she still had the floor. "I don't want an apology," she said, "but I do want you to understand that what happened here is bigger than one bad judgment. It's a pattern. It's the kind of blindness that destroys trust and silences good people, and Chief Jackson will be hearing about this." The officers nodded, their faces tight with discomfort and perhaps shame. But Elaine wasn't seeking to humiliate them. She wanted to hold them accountable, to force them to reflect, to become better than what they had shown. And then the outside world caught up. Within hours, the videos that had been quietly recorded were now everywhere. On social media, Elaine Carter's name trended globally. News outlets replayed the footage in split screen, Richard shouting, Elaine standing, Amanda being led away. The contrast was unmistakable, the message unmissable. Across platforms, people from all walks of life shared their reactions. Some expressed outrage that Elaine had been treated so poorly. Others expressed guilt that they'd never spoken up in similar situations. But most expressed something else: hope. Here was a woman who had not just endured injustice but had risen above it, turned the tables, and used her power to rewrite the ending. Elaine didn't shy away from the spotlight, but she didn't bathe in it either. She used her voice with purpose. In interviews, she didn't talk about handbags or luxury. She talked about systemic bias, unconscious prejudice, and how real change begins not with policies, but with people who choose to do what's right, even when no one is watching. The store was transformed, not just with new colors or displays, but with new hiring policies, staff training, and outreach programs. Elaine opened mentorship pathways for young people of color interested in fashion and retail leadership. She didn't just change the decor, she changed the narrative. And it wasn't just the boutique that shifted. Tanya, now the manager, proved to be a natural leader. Her eye for detail, her empathy with customers, and her strong sense of justice created a workplace culture that staff actually wanted to be part of. The employees, once stiff and judgmental, now found themselves listening more, judging less, and learning. Richard was let go quietly. There was no public firing, no ceremony. Elaine believed in consequence, not humiliation. And in private, she left him with one parting line: "The next place you work, remember today, let it teach you." As for Amanda, her story too played out publicly. The stolen jewelry, the attempt to walk away unnoticed, the entitlement, her downfall was complete. But Elaine never gloated. She simply let justice take its course, and hoped Amanda might one day understand that privilege cannot protect what the truth eventually exposes. Weeks passed and the buzz died down, but what remained was something deeper, more enduring: a cultural shift. The store became a model of inclusion and fairness. Customers returned, not because of the scandal, but because of the atmosphere. They could feel the difference. And on a quiet afternoon, Elaine returned once more to the store, not as the owner checking on progress, but as a woman pausing to reflect. She stood before the same handbag she had admired months before. Back then, it had seemed like a symbol of something unreachable, something people like her were told they didn't deserve to desire. Now it was just a bag. It no longer held power over her. It no longer represented status or belonging. It simply existed. And she smiled, not because she could afford it, not because she owned the store it sat in, but because she had risen above the need for validation from things. Her validation came from within. She had walked into a space that wanted to erase her, and instead she redrew its blueprint. She had been judged and dismissed, but rather than crumble, she had chosen to lead. That kind of power doesn't scream. It doesn't shove. It doesn't seek permission. It just stands, quiet, unwavering, undeniable. Elaine left the store that day with her head held high, not because she had won, but because she had stayed true. She had reminded the world of a truth often forgotten, that justice isn't just something we wait for, it's something we make, every day, with our choices, with our courage, with our refusal to be silenced. And in that boutique, surrounded by velvet and glass, she had proven one simple, stunning fact. The most valuable thing in the room was never on display. It had walked in on its own 2 feet, and it had changed everything. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.